Hey everyone, so today we're going to be looking at the life of Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh. He was, as everyone probably knows, the Queen's husband and consort for 73 years, and he lived a pretty full and incredible life for the last 99 years. So let's take a look back at it. Prince Philip was born in Corfu, Greece in 1921 as... Wow. So I'm putting it up on the screen, but I'm not even going to try to say that one. Anyway, we'll call him Prince Philip. His uncle was King Constantine I, the King of Greece. At the time, Greece was involved in a war with Turkey called the Greco-Turkish War, and that was going very badly for them. So badly that the King of Greece, Philip's uncle, was removed from power by a coup, and his father was in big trouble too. He was very hot on the military, and he was being blamed for the loss of the war. A revolutionary court banned the king and his entire family, including Philip and his 4 sisters, from Greece for life. So at 14 months old, Philip left Greece in a cot made out of an orange crate. Quite a fall from grace for them. After that, Philip and his family moved to France. His mother suffered from nerves after they fled Greece, and the children were often sent away to friends or relatives when she was struggling. Then one day in 1931, when he was just 10 years old, Philip and his sisters returned home to find their mother, Princess Alice of Battenberg, was just gone. She'd been sent to a sanatorium in Switzerland and diagnosed with schizophrenia. From 1932 to 1937, he didn't see or hear one word from her. His sisters, all older than him, married German aristocrats, and at 10 years old, Philip was left alone. Even after such a horrible incident, he remained remarkably solid and straightforward. He later told an interviewer about the time, "The family broke up. My mother was ill, my sisters were married, my father was in the south of France. I just had to get on with it. You do. One does." It's a very typical British stiff upper lip. And even though he was not British, he clearly had it. So then 10-year-old Philip was sent to boarding schools and shuffled around to various relatives on holidays. He had been going to school in France. After the family broke up, he was sent to the UK because his grandfather on his mother's side had become British after World War I, changed his name from Battenberg to Mountbatten, and Philip was able to live with his aunts and uncles whenever he was on holidays from school. Other than that, he was at the boarding school in Britain. A few years after that, he went to school in Germany because his sisters were living there, and his brother-in-law owned one of the schools, so it was able to get a very good, cheap admittance, I guess. And then the Nazis became a problem. That's how old this guy is. The Nazis became a problem. His school teacher at the time in Germany was Jewish, and he had to get out of there, so he fled to the UK, and Philip actually moved schools just to follow him to the UK. So I guess he must have been a good teacher. Many of Philip's family members, including his 4 sisters, remained in Germany and, stayed married to prominent Nazis. The tragedy was not over for Philip at this point. When he was 16, his sister Cecile, her husband, and her 3 children were all killed in a plane crash. A few months after that, his uncle and guardian died of cancer. Shortly after that, he was done boarding school and moved to the Royal Naval College. While he was there, the King and Queen of Britain came for a royal tour of the school, bringing along their 2 daughters, Princesses Elizabeth and Margaret. As he was the girls' 3rd cousin, the Queen and King asked him to escort the girls on the tour. So Elizabeth and Philip met for the first time. Elizabeth was 13, and as I mentioned, his distant cousin, but she was interested in him right away, and the two began writing to each other after that. Philip graduated the Royal Naval College in 1939, just in time for the outbreak of World War II. From 1940 to 1945, he served in the Navy in both the Mediterranean and the Pacific. Now remember, 2 of his brothers-in-law and other relatives were still in Germany fighting for the Nazis. He started his Navy career as a midshipman, the lowest rank of officer. Then he went to Dartmouth Naval College, where he graduated top of his class and became a sub-lieutenant in 1940. And again, graduated with the highest marks in 4 out of 5 of his classes. His first real action in the war started when Italy invaded Greece. He got mentions in dispatches for picking out Italian cruisers in the dark while in searchlight duty one particular night. 5 ships were sunk that night in total. In another battle, he devised a burning raft to distract the German bombers away from his ship, and they were able to slip away, earning him more honors. By 1942, he's one of the youngest lieutenants in the Navy, becoming the ship's first lieutenant at the unusually early age of 21. He was present on the HMS Whelp in Tokyo Bay in 1945 as the Japanese surrendered and the war ended, and he said later that he was close enough that day to watch through binoculars. After the war, he stayed in the Navy and became lieutenant commander. Now, his status may have helped him become what he did in the Navy, but at the same time, it's not like he was a British royal family member at this time. And it's not like the Greek royal families would have had that much influence at that time on the British Navy. But, you know, he probably did have good contacts and people like that. But it seems like he did still get to this point through his own merit and abilities. Like I said, he graduated top of his class for several of those things. He and Elizabeth are still writing to each other all this time. And after a respectable 7 years, with Elizabeth now 20 and Philip 25, he asked her to marry him. He then asked her father's permission, who gave it on the condition that he wait until Elizabeth was 21 to make the announcement. In that time, Philip abandoned his Greek and Danish titles and claimed those thrones, became a British citizen, became Anglican, and changed his last name to Mountbatten instead of, that. The British grandfather I mentioned earlier had done the same exact thing after World War I, when he moved to Britain and changed his last name from Battenberg to Mountbatten. It was equally important for Philip to do that now because the Second World War had just ended and having a German last name was not very good for the public image at this time, especially when so many of Philip's relatives were German and actually were Nazis as well. Philip and Elizabeth were married November 20th, 1947, and their ceremony was broadcast to the world on BBC Radio. Their wedding was very important to the British people and the British monarchy because it was right after the war. Everyone was still struggling, still trying to rebuild from the war. And of course, as usual, a royal wedding is just like a nice little party to have in the middle of all that to kind of distract people from everything else that's going on in their lives. The day before the wedding, King George gave Philip the titles of Royal Highness, and then the morning of the wedding, he was made Duke of Edinburgh, Earl of Marianus, and Baron Greenwich. He was already a Knight of the Garter, so for 2 days he had the unusual name of Lieutenant His Royal Highness Sir Philip Mountbatten. None of Philip's family was invited to the wedding. His father had died in 1944, his sisters were still married to now ex-Nazis, and his mother was in Greece. It's worth mentioning here that his mother also lived a very interesting life that we don't have time to get into, but she did shelter a lot of Jewish refugees in Greece during the war, which is pretty incredible. Now, after their wedding, Philip and Elizabeth moved to Malta following his Navy career. He was promoted to lieutenant commander, but then in 1952, he was forced to give it up to go on tour with Princess Elizabeth as her father's health was failing and he wasn't able to go himself. While on that tour in Kenya, the king passed away and Elizabeth became queen. Philip's naval career ended at that moment. He knew this would come someday, marrying the heir to the throne, but they had both hoped they would have more time. So they rushed back to the UK, Elizabeth was crowned, and Philip was instrumental in getting her coronation videoed and broadcast for the world to see. At that time, this was still a new idea, videotaping, and many people were against it. This was a huge success, and lots of people bought their first TV just to watch the coronation. Philip was not crowned himself in the service, but instead knelt in front of his wife, her hands enclosing his, and swore to be her liege man of life and limb. Then they had to choose the family name after that. Philip, of course, wanted Mountbatten, but the Queen was finally convinced by Prime Minister Churchill and her grandmother that the name had to be Windsor. This caused a lot of family tension, as Philip complained he was the only man in Britain who couldn't give his children his own name. Much of their early life was filled with this struggle. Philip was a very strong, independent man, obviously, and having to take a backseat to his wife, especially in that time period, must have been very difficult for him. For her part, Elizabeth did everything she could to help. She made a rule that Philip would take precedence over everyone else, including their son Charles, except in Parliament. She only attended Parliament for the annual state opening, and when they were there, he still walked and sat beside her. She also issued an order later declaring any of her other descendants who were not titled Royal Highness, Prince, or Princess would have the last name Mountbatten Windsor. This was perfect timing as it was only 11 days before her son Andrew was born. She also made Philip a prince so that his title was now His Royal Highness Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. There are often rumors about their marriage being unhappy, but people close to the couple have said otherwise and maintained that they actually were very happy. There were some issues in 1956 when Philip went on a solo world tour. He visited Antarctica, opened the Summer Olympics in Melbourne, and the rest of the family stayed in the UK. And he was gone for quite a few months. On the way home, the wife of his private secretary asked her husband for a divorce on the grounds that he was cheating on her. This led to a lot of questions about Philip's own private life, and the secretary was forced to resign. Now, no women have ever come forward to admit to any kind of cheating, and I feel like it might have happened by now. It's been a really long time, but it's really hard to say if they would have or not, because obviously the effect that would have on the monarchy would be totally devastating. Either way, the two are still married and continued to live their lives together for 73 years, so I think that probably speaks for itself. At their 50th wedding anniversary in 1997, Queen Elizabeth gave a speech calling Philip her strength and stay all these years. Now, he also had kind of a politically incorrect side, and he got a reputation for having gaffes or blunders through some of his politically incorrect humor. In fact, Queen Elizabeth was urged before they got married that she should not marry him because he was too funny. And they thought that, he would cause too much drama or obviously too much politically incorrect things to happen when she was trying to do state visits and that sort of thing. And, I mean, they weren't wrong. There have been a few. He's also known for being blunt and straightforward, so he says what's on his mind, and sometimes it gets him into trouble. It's kind of gotten a little better as he got older because, by the time he was older, everyone just said, oh, he's just, a man of that generation. He's just a crazy old, grumpy old man, whatever. But I think he was like this the whole time, and, they weren't the right humor for those situations, but he's got some good ones. So here are a few of the best examples that I genuinely enjoyed. A journalist asked him once about his possible infidelity. "Good God, woman," he said, "have you ever stopped to think that for years I have never moved anywhere without a policeman accompanying me? So how the hell could I get away with anything like that?" I mean, he's got a point. Next, talking about his daughter Anne, he said, "If it doesn't fart or eat hay, she isn't interested." Anne is a respected equestrian. At a World Wildlife Foundation gathering in 1993, he asked a fashion writer, "You're not wearing mint knickers, are you?" At an address to the General Dental Council in 1960, odontopodology, I don't know if I said that right, is the science of opening your mouth and putting your foot in it, a science which I have practiced for a good many years. And when he met an Army cadet, Stephen Maneri, who'd been blinded by a real IRA bomb, the Queen asked the cadet how much sight he retained, and Philip said, "Not a lot, judging by the tie he's wearing." Maneri didn't take offense because he understood that he was making a joke and trying to. He said, "I think he just uses humor to try to make people feel more comfortable." Now, basically, that humor is a little dark for the press and the polite world, and he didn't always keep it to himself, so it got him into a little bit of trouble. Now, back to his more serious accomplishments. It's a long list. This man, I mean, he obviously didn't have a job and, had a lot of benefits being the Queen's husband and all that. So he had a lot of time for this stuff, but still, it's still impressive. So let's just look. I just made a list because there's a lot. He was involved with environmental action and co-founded the World Wildlife Foundation. He was the president of it for 15 years. He also shot a tiger during these years, which caused a real uproar, and sometimes he got criticized for his other shooting and hunting activities. Again, it's just a little contradicting, but that's okay. His most famous charity work is, of course, the Duke of Edinburgh Awards, which they've been talking about a lot since his passing. He created these in 1956 to help young people navigate the transition to adulthood. He has completed in his life 22,219 solo royal engagements, not counting the ones he did with the Queen. He drafted the rules for international carriage competitions and even wrote a book on the subject, and represented Britain in 5 international championships. He wrote 14 other books on subjects like science, environmentalism, carriage driving, and technology. He was involved in the design of stained glass windows for a private chapel at Windsor Castle. He got his RAF wings in 1953. He clocked 5,986 flying hours on 59 different types of aircraft. He also got a helicopter and private plane license and was the first person in the royal family to fly out of Buckingham Palace in a helicopter, which must have been pretty cool. He's also the first person in the royal family to ever go to Antarctica or cross the Arctic Circle. He started driving an electric car back in 1960 and was already talking about carbon dioxide warming the planet back then, before global warming had become a household phrase. He spoke English, French, and German. He left Greece as a baby, so he did not speak Greek. In 2009, he became the longest-serving British royal consort. In 2011, he reduced his royal duties, and the Queen gave him the title of Lord Admiral for his birthday, his 90th birthday. In 2013, he became the oldest ever male British royal and third longest lived member of the British royal family. behind Princess Alice and the Queen Mother. In a 2000 interview when he was 79, they asked if he would like to live to be 100. And he said he couldn't imagine anything worse. He had no desire whatsoever, and bits of him were falling off already. In 2017, he retired completely from royal duties when he was 96. And their 70th wedding anniversary was in 2017. In 2020, they celebrated their 73rd wedding anniversary. And that has got to be some records all by itself, because not very many people live long enough to make it there, and not very many people choose to make it there. So that's pretty impressive. And he also spent decades of his life dedicated to royal duty, supporting the Queen, and helping her with all of her own work. So, yeah, that's a long life and a long list of accomplishments that he achieved in that life. So that's pretty impressive just all by itself. I feel like, obviously being the Queen's husband, he gets passed over quite a bit, and that was just something he had to deal with his whole life. But when you look at it, that's a lot of things for one person to do in their life, especially some of the things like being in World War II, becoming these lieutenant commanders, getting all these flying hours. Like, that stuff is not something that just anyone can wake up one morning and decide they're going to do. So it's pretty impressive. And I can understand why he was getting so much respect, and, why the Queen wanted to marry this guy. He's a cool dude. So make sure that you like this video if you found this interesting, and leave me a comment if you have anything you want to add, or tell me what your favorite part was, or what you think is most interesting. And I will see you guys next time. Thanks, bye.